Hi, I'm Rebecca Zadibble and I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I'm an artist and art teacher here, and I have a little tip for you today I thought might come in handy. I'm squeezing out paint into my palette, and over again, though this might seem to be the simplest of jobs as an artist, sometimes in watercolor and in my classes I just find that people really don't seem to get what they have to do to get the most out of their paints in the palette. So today I've been looking at my palette, which you can see here, and some of my colors are getting a little bit lean. I don't have very much pigment in some of the middle of my wells, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to maybe share with you what I do when my palette gets to this point. I'm an artist who likes to have a little bit of moist paint available to me in my palette. I don't like it when my wells are completely dried and cracked. Although you can rehydrate watercolors, and we waste very little paint, relatively speaking, as watercolorists, we can use paint that has become dried and cracked. I just find that for my purposes, sometimes when I let my pigments get to that place, it's harder to reanimate them and get them to where I can get rich, dark, deep color if I want to. So I like to have my wells a little moist, and I'm just going to give you some of the things that I do to keep my palette in that condition. First of all, I like to use artist quality, artist grade paints. I don't like to use student grade paints because in my experience they're duller, they have less pigment, and I have to do more to try to achieve the same effect. So I'm a real fan and a real advocate for using artist grade paints for that reason. You may be tempted to buy 15 tubes of paint for 20 bucks at your local store and think that you're being economical, but truly, what's your time worth? And if you're really interested in getting the best result, I would suggest that you bypass that, buy 3 tubes of really good paint and do the best you can with those tubes until you can invest maybe one at a time in more pigments. On my website I have a list of pigments that I call must-haves, and then I have a list of pigments that I call fun to have. And if you were to go to my website and check out those pigments that say must-have, you'd basically find that I have a warm and a cool of each primary color, the primaries being red, blue, and yellow. So I think those would be the place I would start. And then when and where you feel like you'd like to add more, you could certainly look at my list of fun to have colors, and you'd end up becoming acquainted with the full range of colors that are here on my palette right now. When and where I get ready to squeeze out fresh paint into my wells, I like to have a few things on tap. I like to have something called gum arabic. Now, gum arabic is a binder. It is what is mixed with watercolor these days in order to keep it a little gummy and a little bit more fluid. I like to add a little bit into the wells with my watercolor just to kind of help keep them a little damp in between working times. And so this is a brand, American Journey, put out by Cheap Joe's. Any brand would do, but this is the one that I happen to have today. I also like to have little sticks of some sort. This is a coffee stirrer. You could also use a toothpick of some sort. Really anything that's small and narrow will fit the bill. The other thing I like to have is one of these little keys. It's like for rolling toothpaste around. This is specifically formulated for paint tubes, but I think you could probably use a toothpaste key just as easily. And as you can see here, it's a means of wrapping this paint tube around and trying to extract as much as possible. My hands are just not strong enough, unfortunately, sometimes to really put the pressure on it that's required. And so I like to use one of these keys to sort of help me get as much out of there as possible. And the way you use one of these is you just stick your tube through the end of it. There's a little groove in there. You stick your tube in there and you roll it around, and it will help you obviously flatten it out and get all the paint toward the opening. Once you get it toward the opening, what you can do is just put it right into your well, squeezing it out as much as possible, and then again wrapping it that little bit more around the tube to get even more out. Doing as much as you can just physically with this little device and your fingers. Now you're going to find that there's quite a bit, it seems like, that gets hung up in the throat of the tube, and so this is where my little sticks come in handy. I also like to wear a glove just because, as you can see, you'll get some of this on your fingers without even trying. So maybe a second glove would have been in order today, but I'll just stick this in there and kind of grab some and bring it out. You can also, if you want, bring a little bit of water into the tube to just sort of hydrate it a little bit. This is where I actually prefer having toothpicks to these coffee stirrers, because this will get in there and kind of mix things up. And then you can just kind of pull it out and let it drip into your well. This is all good paint. There's no reason to waste any of it. And a little water won't hurt. You could just play with that as much as you like until you feel like you get all of it out of there. But those are a couple of tricks that I use to get all the paint out of there that I can. Once I have the paint in the well, you'll see you'll end up with these rolls or these peaks that might form. What I'll do generally is let them sort of sit there for a day until they set up a little bit. If you don't have the patience for that and you want to take care of it and make it as user-friendly as possible later on, what you can think about doing is taking a gloved finger, another reason for the glove, and maybe putting a little bit of gum arabic on your fingertip and just depressing that well so that it just becomes a little bit indented. That way, when and where you put water on it, rather than having it roll off the sides and down a hill, it's going to hold the water and keep that well a little bit moister as a result. I like to have that little depression in there. Some artists will tell you that they don't like to do that because it sets their colors up for becoming contaminated. They'd rather have that color roll off the side. It really is a matter of preference. For me, I'm more about moisture than I am about pigment contamination. I'd rather have it be moist. So it's kind of a trade-off. And on this one you can see I've got the peaks that have formed on this particular well, and I'm just going to roll over them with my finger and flatten them out until there's a little bit of a depression. The gum arabic kind of helps keep the gloved finger from sticking, and it won't hurt the paint. It can kind of roll across the surface. So that's a little hint for you there too. I like to have my wells quite full. I think that it helps them to hold the water when and where I spritz them prior to painting. It just allows me to have access to more color when and where I need it. So I hope that's a little bit of a hint for you today. just I encourage you not to have teeny tiny little what my friend Carlin Holman calls canary turds in your wells. I think it's better to have more paint than less paint. Why have it in a tube? Why not have it in your palette where it's readily accessible and available to you the next time you want to paint? Squeeze that paint out, have some fun with it, and let me know if this helps you.